Good morning, everyone. It's Anita Menon from hearthealthbrainhealth.com, encouraging healthy grieving and mindful actions. Today, I thought I would talk a little bit about what many scriptures, I would say almost all scriptures, or all teachings, or even philosophy, even psychology, talks about how to end suffering. But today, I'll focus a little bit on Buddhism, and I know that this is the focus of Vedanta too. And one of the things that I came across was from a site which talks about Buddhism and ending sufferings. And these were the 5 points that they talked about here that I'd love to share with you. So it says to end sufferings, we should, 1, identify and acknowledge the suffering. 2, practice meditation, the most powerful tool. 3, express compassion. 4, understand that nothing is born or lost. 5, acknowledge that nothing is permanent. And the reason I'd like to share these with you today is because a lot of times we can read things like this and have an understanding. We might even memorize these 5 different points, but to actually apply them in action in our life takes a different level of understanding and action. And understanding is just the mind, but I'll say there is a knowledge base that comes from beyond the mind, not the knowledge of the mind, but an understanding from compassion and love. That is a very different space than what the mind will say, this is right, or this is not right, or this is good, or this is not good. And anyone can get stuck in thinking from the mind and feeling like we understand something and not really acting from it, which is not really what the suggestions are really meant to do in terms of overcoming suffering. So the reason I'd like to share this with you today is because yesterday I ran into another lady who's also visiting this lovely space that I'm in. And she's traveling with her young 7 or 8-year-old son. And it's such a lovely conversation we had yesterday. But I learned from her that she had visited Cambodia a few years ago and had ventured off to walk on her own in a particular space and happened to come across a beautiful temple, which happened to be, unknown to her, the temple of Buddhist monks. And these monks were actually in this space as their living quarters. And she was in this space unknowing and just kind of seeing and taking pictures. And suddenly, 10 dogs came running at her, rushing at her. And she was so frightened because they were definitely aggressive sounding. She started screaming at the top of her lungs. Now, this Buddhist monastery had about 100 monks that were there, and not one single person came to help her. So she's screaming at the top of her lungs. She ended up feeling very, very shocked and frightened in that situation when finally one dog actually did bite her. And in this time, there was one monk walking by very closely to her and then walked by completely, didn't stop, didn't say anything, didn't just walk by. And she ended up running away fearfully. And yes, she had that dog bite. She still has the teeth marks to prove it, I guess. And what a sad situation to hear about, that in a space that we would feel, I believe, that we would feel the most safe, that here are people who are compassionate and caring and loving and they mean well, and I'll be safe here. Even if I didn't know that that's where I was walking into at the time, once I realized that's where I am, I would have had a feeling of safety and comfort. And it's interesting that even in that spot, she wasn't really safe from these dogs. Now, when we read these things of how to end suffering, we can see that we say identify and acknowledge suffering. Well, people might have identified that she was suffering, yes. They might be practicing meditation in this time, so very centered. I better not get distracted because my purpose is to focus on my meditation, not letting anything distract me. And a lot of people who do, whether prayer or meditation, are trained in terms of do not be distracted by anything. And then there's express compassion. So I might have compassion for myself that, oh, I'm feeling her suffering, I'm aware of it, I'm acknowledging it, and I must avoid acting on it, which might be one way to interpret this. I'm expressing compassion on myself. And then there's this understanding that nothing is born or lost. And so I think that, you know what? I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. So she's not the body, she's not the mind. And if she got hurt, it's okay. If there's some divine will, something will protect her. It's not me. and then acknowledge that nothing is permanent. So let's say she got even more damage. Maybe she even maybe she got an infection from that bite. Maybe she actually got attacked by all 10 dogs and nothing is permanent. So I can just easily say, well, you know what, she'll have another life. And I wonder if that's really the purpose of understanding and applying and knowing right action. And I do not believe it is. Of course, that's an opinion. But I think it's a logical opinion or awareness of this that's so often. So imagine desire. I talked about desire in a few videos, and I will actually put a link to one video about desire under this video too. But if you imagine that many of us can have an opinion, a judgment about people who desire money, people who have greed, that is very easy to see that this person is greedy, this person is lusty, this person is power hungry, this person is whichever, all of those things on the external world make sense. Now, you know, the same thing is reflecting on our internal world. And when we think about people who are becoming spiritual, we can see that on the internal world, if I have this intention, I'm going to be connected with a higher source and I'm going to connect with my higher self, or I'm going to connect with God even. And I have to be very centered and not be distracted, that when I'm seeing something in my present situation where I can do something to help, what is the right action in that? And people will believe different things in this situation, of course. And my perspective is that if I can see that someone is suffering right beside me and I can help, I choose to help. And I hope that you would too. But I want you to know that even spirituality, that's such a intention of I'm going to do this right and I've got to do it this way, that we miss sometimes the obvious experiences of those around us. So we think about Buddhism or monasteries or monks or nuns or priests, and we think about how often it's very much this idea of control the senses. If I see a woman, if I'm a man, and I see a woman, I mean even a woman, if I see someone, do not get distracted by that, because that might flood me with desires that will then lead me into a different direction rather than focusing on my higher self or the higher self or God. And that's not good. And here is a basic experience of someone going through a suffering right beside me. And if I can't do something in that, what is my desire for getting to that other space blocking me from or clouding me from in this basic action? So today I'd love for you to think about this and see whether you are clouded, whether from external experiences or whether from something inside that you're trying to get to that doesn't let you see the obvious. And that, of course, also ties in with that art of observation that I just spoke about yesterday. This next quotation, or information that I'd like to share with you, is about the Noble Eightfold Path. This is again from Buddhism. And I'd like you to know that the Noble Eightfold Path has these qualities to it. It says, the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path are right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And if you think about this, the effort is the action. So effort and action, it says right action. There is an action to be taken, and that takes an effort. Does it take an effort to let go of my desire to actually do something right? Yes, it does. I believe it does. And today I'd love for you to sit for 5 minutes after this video and just see whether you're using the Eightfold Path consciously or not. Know that just doing something good to help the world or yourself, and of course it's by helping ourselves that we then help the world, recognize every moment has an opportunity for us to take right action. And when we are truly connected, we will not hesitate to take the right action. And of course, I would love to finish with this quotation by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is talking about Buddha. And he says here, the Buddha spoke about suffering in terms of food. Nothing can survive without food, even your love. If you don't feed your love properly, your love will die. Your suffering is there because you have been feeding it. Your suffering is there because you have been feeding it. If you're feeding love, right action flows automatically. That's my suggestion, my opinion, my recommendation for you. work from love, understand suffering within you and around you too. I wish you a fabulous day ahead, and I hope you remember, transform your mind and transform your life. Have a great day, everyone.